Welcome, dear listener, to another gentle journey through the shadows of history. Tonight, we invite you to settle back, perhaps pull a soft blanket closer, and allow your mind to drift into the iron-scented air and bustling boulevards of 1880s Paris. You are safe here, in your comfortable present, wrapped in the certainty of modern safety regulations and workers' rights. As we explore a time when ambition towered above human welfare, and when dreams of architectural glory came at the price of blood and bone. Please consider subscribing to the channel and drop a comment below. Imagine yourself standing on the cobblestones of the Champ de Mars in the autumn of 1887, watching as an impossible structure begins to pierce the Parisian sky. The air carries the acrid smell of hot metal and coal smoke, mixed with the earthy dampness of the Seine around you. Crowds gather daily to witness what many consider an abomination against the heavens themselves. Gustave Eiffel's Iron Tower, rising like a skeletal finger pointing accusingly at God. The hammering of rivets echoes across the city like a mechanical heartbeat, constant and relentless, marking the passage of days that will either create a monument to human ingenuity or become a towering testament to folly. The year is 1888, and Paris prepares for the Exposition Universelle that will showcase French technological prowess to the world. But beneath the grand ambitions and political posturing lies a darker truth: the lives of ordinary men who climb higher each day into increasingly dangerous altitudes. Their survival dependent on luck, skill, and the whims of weather that can turn deadly without warning. These are the forgotten heroes and victims of industrial progress. The men whose names history rarely records, yet whose blood and sweat literally built the symbol of modern France. Tonight, we'll walk with these workers through their daily struggle against gravity and death. Witness the fierce controversy that surrounded their efforts, explore the secret world hidden at the tower's peak, and finally, descend to the glittering salons where the wealthy toasted their empire, while denouncing the very monument that would define it. Close your eyes, breathe deeply, and let us journey together into an age when iron dreams cast long shadows over the city of light. If you want to help me to keep doing these videos, please consider subscribing to the channel and hit the like button. It motivates and helps me keep bringing videos in this format. If you'd like to hear about a specific topic, leave a comment below. Right? I'll show you in the video when your topic is chosen. The first pale light of dawn creeps across the Seine as you make your way through the narrow streets toward the Champ de Mars. Your boots echoing against wet cobblestones, still slick with morning dew. The air carries the metallic bite of winter, and your breath forms small clouds that dissipate quickly in the December cold of 1888. Around you, other men emerge from the shadows: riveting gangs, structural workers, crane operators, all heading toward the same impossible destination that grows taller with each passing week. Their faces bear the weathered marks of men who work with fire and iron, hands already blackened despite the early hour, holding that particular weariness that comes from constantly dancing with death at dizzying heights. You can hear the tower before you see it, the rhythmic hammering that begins before sunrise and continues long after sunset, punctuated by the sharp crack of heated rivets being driven into place in the groaning protest of metal under stress. As you round the corner, the structure reveals itself in all its skeletal magnificence, rising 300 feet into the gray Parisian sky like the bones of some prehistoric giant. The framework appears delicate from this distance, almost gossamer-like, in the morning mist, but you know the brutal reality that awaits each beam weighs tons. Every joint represents hours of back-breaking labor, and every level conquered means another step closer to the clouds and further from the safety of solid ground. The site entrance buzzes with controlled chaos as hundreds of workers stream through the gates. Foremen bark instructions in rapid French, their voices cutting through the general din of preparation. Horse-drawn carts loaded with iron beams create temporary traffic jams as they maneuver through the narrow pathways between construction areas. Steam rises from portable forges scattered throughout the worksite, where the day's first batch of rivets are already heating to the cherry-red glow that makes them malleable enough to drive home. The smell of coal smoke mingles with the earthy scent of disturbed soil and the sharp tang of iron filings that seem to coat everything on the site. You join your riveting gang from men whose lives have become intertwined by necessity and shared peril. There's Henry, the heater. His job requires him to tend the portable forge and heat rivets to precisely the right temperature. His face bears the permanent flush of a man who spends his days inches from glowing coals, and his hands, despite thick leather gloves, show the small burns and scars that mark his trade. Jean-Claude, the catcher, possesses reflexes honed by months of grabbing red-hot rivets thrown from 20 feet below. His concentration absolute, because a missed catch could mean third-degree burns or worse. Marcel, the bucker-up, holds the rivets in place with an iron bar, while you, the driver, hammer them home with a pneumatic gun that seems to transfer its violent vibrations directly into your bones. The work begins, as it always does, with Henry firing up the forge while the rest of you gather around the day's assignment sheet. Today, you're working on the second-level platform, nearly 200 feet above the ground. The platform itself is a marvel of engineering. Ring girders create a lattice floor that offers glimpses of the earth far below through gaps wide enough for a man to fall through. There are no safety nets, no harnesses, no protective equipment beyond your own vigilance and the grip strength in your hands. The company provides nothing but the tools and the iron itself. Your life insurance, such as it is, consists of whatever your family can scrape together for a funeral should the worst happen. The ascent begins via a series of wooden scaffolds and iron ladders that seem to stretch endlessly upward. Each rung brings you higher above the city, and with each level, the wind grows stronger and more unpredictable. At ground level, the December morning feels merely cold. At 50 feet, the breeze carries a sharper bite. At 100 feet, the wind begins to buffet you with enough force to require careful handholds. By the time you reach the second-level platform at nearly 200 feet, you're operating in an environment where a momentary loss of balance or a sudden gust of wind could send you plummeting to certain death on the hard earth below. The view from this height, simultaneously breathtaking and terrifying. Paris spreads out beneath you like a detailed map. It's a winding Seine catching the morning light. It's a grand boulevards of Haussmann's redesign creating geometric patterns across the urban landscape. Notre Dame rises in the distance, its Gothic spires now seeming almost modest compared to the iron giant you're helping to create. But the beauty comes at a cost up here. You're exposed to every whim of weather, every shift in wind direction. It's every drop in temperature that makes metal contract and become more brittle. The work itself requires a precision that seems almost impossible under these conditions. Henry, working at his portable forge that has been hauled up to this level, heats rivets to exactly the right temperature to cold, and they won't drive properly. Too hot, and they'll burn through the tongues that carry them. The forge itself is a marvel of dangerous engineering, a coal-fired furnace that must maintain precise temperatures while being fed by workers who must constantly be aware that a slip could send them tumbling off the platform. The heat from the forge creates its own microclimate, waves of warmth that feel blessed in the cold December air, but also create dangerous thermals that can affect your balance. When Henry signals that a rivet is ready, Jean-Claude positions himself precisely 20 feet away, far enough to be safe from the forge's heat. It's close enough to catch the glowing metal projectile that will come hurtling through the air. The throw itself is a thing of beauty when done correctly. Henry uses specially designed tongs to grip the white-hot rivet and hurls it in a perfect arc through the frigid air. For a moment, the rivet traces a line of fire against the gray December. sky, its heat visible as it cuts through the cold atmosphere. Jean-Claude's catch must be perfect too early, and he burns his hands through his leather gloves. Too late, and the rivet falls through the platform gaps to the ground far below, possibly injuring workers on lower levels. Marcel positions the caught rivet into the precisely drilled hole, holding it steady with an iron bar while you bring the pneumatic driver to bear. The machine itself is a relatively new innovation, powered by compressed air lines that snaked across the platform like mechanical intestines. The driver weighs nearly 40 pounds and requires tremendous upper body strength to control, especially when you're working at awkward angles or in cramped positions between girders. When it fires, the tool delivers hammer blows at a rate that will be impossible for human hands to achieve. But the vibration travels up your arms and into your shoulders with enough force to leave you aching for hours after each shift. The noise is perhaps the most challenging aspect of the work environment. The pneumatic drivers create a staccato percussion that echoes off the iron framework and multiplies until it becomes a metallic symphony of industrial progress. Add to this the constant hammering from other gangs working on different sections, the shouting of foremen trying to coordinate activities across multiple levels, and the general din of a construction site that never truly stops, and you have an acoustic environment that leaves most workers partially deaf within months of starting the job. Conversations must be shouted, hand signals become crucial for communication, and the end of each workday brings a ringing in your ears that takes hours to subside. The physical demands of the work are relentless. Each rivet requires precise placement, perfect timing, and sustained concentration. A typical day might involve driving hundreds of rivets, each one demanding the same level of attention as the first. Your hands, despite thick gloves, develop calluses that split and bleed, then heal into even thicker protective layers. Your shoulders and back ache from controlling the heavy pneumatic equipment. Your legs develop the particular strength that comes from maintaining balance on narrow iron beams while wind gusts try to knock you off balance. By the end of each day, your body bears the accumulated stress of hours spent fighting gravity while creating something that defies natural order. Weather adds another layer of complexity to an already dangerous job. December in Paris brings sudden rain showers that make the iron framework slippery and treacherous. When water hits the hot forges, great clouds of steam erupt, momentarily blinding workers and creating hazardous conditions as forms on the metal surfaces during particularly cold nights. And the morning shift often begins with the dangerous task of chipping away frozen condensation before work can begin. Snow creates its own challenges, obscuring the gaps in the platform flooring and making it difficult to judge distances accurately. Wind is perhaps the most dangerous enemy. Sudden gusts can knock a man off balance, send tools flying through the air like projectiles, or make it impossible to accurately throw and catch the red-hot rivets that are essential to the construction process. Yet, despite these challenges, there's an undeniable camaraderie among the workers. The shared danger creates bonds that extend beyond the worksite. Men who trust each other with their lives during the day often gather in nearby taverns after work, sharing stories, complaints, and the dark humor that helps process the daily proximity to death. They develop their own language, a mixture of technical terms and slang that allows for quick communication in the noisy environment. Hand signals become as important as spoken words, and experienced crews can coordinate complex operations with minimal verbal communication. The tower's construction proceeds with mechanical precision, but the human cost becomes apparent as the structure grows taller. Minor injuries are so common they go unreported: cuts from sharp metal edges, burns from contact with hot surfaces, bruises from dropped tools, and the constant strain injuries that accumulate over months of repetitive motion. More serious accidents happen with frightening regularity. Men fall from scaffolds, are struck by falling tools or materials, or suffer severe burns from contact with overheated metal. The company keeps minimal records of these incidents, and workers understand that complaints about safety conditions quite easily result in termination and replacement by one of the hundreds of men who wait outside the gates each morning, hoping for work. As the morning progresses and the sun climbs higher, you find yourself settling into the rhythm that defines life as a tower worker, the constant cycle of heating, throwing, catching, and riveting that will continue until darkness falls. It makes the work too dangerous to continue. Around you, the tower grows incrementally taller, each completed section representing thousands of individual rivets driven home by teams like yours. The work is simultaneously monotonous and terrifying, requiring sustained concentration, while constantly threatening to exact the ultimate penalty for a moment's inattention. By midday, the December sun has climbed high enough to cast short shadows between the iron latwork, though its warmth struggles to penetrate the metallic chill that seems to emanate from the tower's framework itself. The morning's work has left your shoulders aching from controlling the pneumatic riveting gun, and your hands throbbed despite the thick leather gloves that show new burns and cuts from the day's labor. Around you, the other members of your gang show similar signs of where Henry's face bears fresh red marks from sparks that escaped his forge, while Jean-Claude flexes fingers that have caught dozens of white-hot rivets thrown across the 20-foot gap that separates heater from catcher. The lunch whistle echoes across the construction site, shrill note barely audible above the constant din of hammering, drilling, and the groaning protest of metal under stress. But for the workers laboring on the upper levels of the tower, the whistle represents both relief and a unique form of torture. It's relief because it signals a blessed break from the relentless physical demands of the work, but torture because it's ascending 200 feet to ground level for a proper meal will consume most of the allotted break time, leaving barely enough opportunity to eat before the afternoon shift begins. Instead, you and your fellow workers have adapted to a practice that would terrify most grounds-dwelling Parisians, taking your midday meal suspended in the air, seated on iron beams with your legs dangling over a drop that could kill you instantly. The scene that unfolds across the tower's various levels as lunchtime arrives is both surreal and oddly beautiful. Dozens of men find purchase on girders, crossbeams, and platform edges, unwrapping modest meals from cloth bundles while the city of Paris spreads out beneath them like a living map. Your own lunch consists of the typical worker's fare, a chunk of dark bread, hard cheese that is aged to the consistency of wood, and perhaps a piece of dried sausage if fortune has smiled upon your household budget this week. The bread is baked 3 days ago and purchased for a few centimes from the vendor who sets up each morning outside the construction site gates. Requires careful chewing lest you break a tooth on its iron-hard crust. The cheese provides protein and sustenance, though its flavor has been overwhelmed by the metallic taste that seems to coat everything at this altitude, as if the iron framework itself exhales a fine dust that settles on tongue and palate. Water becomes a precious commodity. At these heights, the company provides no drinking facilities above ground level, leaving workers to carry their own supplies up the long series of ladders and scaffolds that connect earth to sky. Most men bring small flasks or bottles, though the weight of even a modest water supply becomes significant when added to the tools and equipment that must be hauled up each morning. By lunchtime, the water in your flask has taken on the metallic taste that seems to permeate everything connected to the tower. And in winter, it often carries a thin skin of ice that must be broken before drinking. The view from your improvised dining perch is simultaneously magnificent and disorienting. Directly below, you can see other construction crews working on lower levels of the tower, their movements appearing almost insect-like from this height. The forges on the ground level appear as tiny points of orange light, and the steam from multiple forges creates small clouds that drift across the construction site like miniature weather systems. Beyond the immediate work area, Paris extends in all directions, a sprawling urban landscape that seems to stretch to the horizon. To the north, the grand boulevards of Haussmann's redesign create geometric patterns across the city, their width and straightness a stark contrast to the medieval warren of narrow streets that still dominate much of the old city. The Seine curves through the urban landscape like a silver ribbon, catching the pale December sunlight and reflecting it back in scattered diamonds of brilliance. Bridges span the river at regular intervals, each one carrying a steady stream of horse-drawn traffic, pedestrians, the occasional omnibus that represents the latest advance in public transportation. The contrast between your elevated position and the street-level bustle below creates a peculiar sense of detachment, as if you're observing the daily life of Paris from another world entirely. People appear as tiny figures moving along predetermined paths, their individual concerns and urgencies invisible from this height. Carriages become toy-like objects navigating between equally diminutive horses, and even the largest buildings seem reduced to the scale of children's blocks arranged across a vast play area. But this aerial perspective comes with constant reminders of your precarious situation. The wind at 200 feet carries a bite that ground-level breezes lack entirely, and sudden gusts can arrive without warning to buffet your body and test your grip on whatever iron surface provides your temporary seat. The metal framework conducts cold with ruthless efficiency, drawing heat from your body through direct contact and leaving you constantly aware that the very structure supporting you seeks to leach away your warmth. Eating while suspended at this height requires a particular skill set that no amount of ground-level experience can prepare you for. Each bite must be taken with careful attention to balance, as leaning too far forward to access food can shift your center of gravity dangerously. Dropped utensils or food scraps disappear instantly into the void below, potentially becoming projectiles that could injure workers on lower levels or passersby on the ground. Most men quickly learn to tear their bread into small pieces and consume them systematically, minimizing the risk of losing precious nutrition to gravity's relentless pull. The social dynamics of these elevated lunch breaks create their own unique culture among the tower workers. Conversations drift between work groups as men shout observations, complaints, and dark humor across the gaps between different sections of the framework. The shared experience of eating suspended above the city creates a bond that extends beyond the normal camaraderie of manual laborers. These men understand each other's daily struggle against gravity, weather, and industrial hazard in ways that ground-based workers cannot comprehend. Henry regales the group with stories from his previous job at the Schneider Armaments Factory, where he learned to work with the intense heat required for metalworking, but never had to worry about plummeting to his death if he lost his footing. His tales of factory life seemed almost quaint from this elevated perspective dangers that remained at ground level. Supervisors who shouted instructions rather than semaphoring them across vast vertical distances. And lunch breaks taken in proper dining halls rather than perched on iron beams like mechanical birds. Jean-Claude speaks little during these breaks, preferring to focus his attention on massaging hands that have spent the morning catching objects hot enough to brand flesh even through thick leather gloves. His fingers showed the accumulated damage of months performing this specialized task. Permanent discoloration from repeated minor burns, calluses thick enough to provide their own protective layer, spizz, and the slight tremor that comes from repeated exposure to sudden temperature extremes. He chews his bread slowly and methodically, conserving energy for the afternoon's work, while his eyes constantly scan the framework around him, noting wind patterns and potential hazards with the automatic vigilance of a man whose survival depends on environmental awareness. Marcel, the bucker-up, uses the lunch break to inspect his tools and check for the small damages that accumulate during normal use. His iron bars showed chips and dings from hundreds of impacts with hot rivets, and he files away rough edges that could tear gloves or catch on clothing at critical moments. The attention he pays to equipment maintenance reflects the brutal reality of their Situation A tool failure at 200 feet above ground could mean the difference between life and death. Replacement equipment must be hauled up from ground level at significant cost in time and energy. As you consume your modest meal, you become aware of the layers of sound that create the tower's acoustic environment. Most obvious is the constant percussion of construction work, the hammering of rivet guns, the ring of metal striking metal, and the occasional groan of structural elements adjusting to new loads. But beneath this industrial symphony lies a more subtle collection of sounds that speak to the tower's relationship with its environment. Wind moves through the iron framework with a sound like a massive pipe organ, creating notes that change pitch and volume based on atmospheric conditions and the tower's growing height. The structure itself contributes to this acoustic landscape through the constant small adjustments that occur as temperature changes cause metal to expand and contract. These movements create pops, clicks, and occasional groaning sounds that new workers find alarming, but veterans learn to interpret as the normal conversation between iron and environment. Some workers claim they can predict weather changes by listening to these structural sounds, though whether this represents genuine meteorological sensitivity or simple coincidence remains a matter of debate. From your elevated position, you can also hear the sounds of the city below. Though distance and wind conspire to transform familiar urban noise into something ethereal and strange, the clatter of horse hooves on cobblestones becomes a distant rhythmic tapping, while the calls of street vendors blend into an indistinct musical backdrop. Church bells ring at regular intervals throughout the day, their bronze voices carrying easily through the thin December air to provide temporal landmarks for workers who must judge time primarily by the sun's position and the intensity of their own fatigue. The lunch break also provides an opportunity to observe the tower's impact on the broader Parisian landscape. Even in its unfinished state, the structure has already begun to alter the city's visual character in ways that go far beyond its immediate physical presence. The tower's growing height creates new sightlines and perspectives that never existed before, allowing views of familiar landmarks from previously impossible angles. Notre Dame, the Pantheon, and the various monuments that define Paris's skyline must now share a visual space with this industrial interloper that threatens to dwarf them all more subtly. The tower's construction has begun to influence the city's daily rhythms in ways that most Parisians probably don't consciously recognize. The constant noise of construction work creates a new background texture to urban life, of the daily migration of hundreds of workers to and from the construction site affects traffic patterns, local commerce, and the general atmosphere of the surrounding neighborhoods. Street vendors have adapted their routes to serve the workers. Tavern keepers have adjusted their hours to accommodate the post-work gatherings. And even the local police have modified their patrol schedules to account for the crowds that gather daily to watch the towers progress. As the lunch break draws toward its conclusion, you can see other work gangs beginning to stir from their various perches across the tower's framework. Tools are gathered, equipment checked, and the gradual transition back to work begins with the slow, careful movements of men who understand that a moment's carelessness could end their lives instantly. The descent from your lunch perch to your afternoon workstation requires the same focused attention that every movement demands at this height. Careful handholds, deliberate foot placement, and constant awareness of wind conditions that could transform a routine climb into a deadly fall. The afternoon shift promises to bring its own challenges as December's brief daylight begins its inevitable fade toward winter darkness. Shadows will lengthen across the framework, creating pools of deep cold where the sun's weak warmth cannot penetrate. The metal itself will begin to contract as temperatures drop, creating new stresses in the structure and requiring constant adjustment to riveting techniques. And always, the knowledge that each passing hour brings you closer to the evening's dangerous descent. When fatigue combines with failing light to create the most hazardous period of the entire workday. But for now, this brief moment between the morning's labor and the afternoon's resumption of the relentless construction schedule. You sit suspended between earth and sky, chewing hard bread and contemplating the strange circumstances that have placed you among the ranks of men who build impossible dreams from iron and sweat, defying gravity while dancing daily with death in the service of a vision that most of Paris still considers an abomination against both God and good taste. As December's pale sun begins its descent toward the horizon, casting long shadows across the Champ de Mars, the nature of your work undergoes a subtle but profound transformation. The afternoon shift brings with it a growing awareness that each passing hour brings you closer to the most dangerous period of the entire working day, the evening descent from heights that seem to grow more treacherous as darkness approaches. The December daylight, already brief and weak, begins to fade by 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and by 4:30, the advancing shadows have begun to merge the tower's iron framework into a maze of dark shapes and uncertain footing. The company's policy regarding work hours reflects a brutal calculation between productivity and acceptable losses. Construction continues until visibility becomes so poor that even the most experienced workers cannot safely navigate the framework. But this threshold is determined not by worker safety, but by the point at which accidents become so frequent that they interfere with the construction schedule. The result is a daily race against darkness that places every man working above ground level in increasingly perilous circumstances as the natural light fails. Your riveting gang has moved to the third-level platform by mid-afternoon, nearly 250 feet above the ground. At this height, the wind carries a bite that no amount of heavy clothing can fully deflect, and the metal framework conducts cold with such efficiency that direct contact draws heat from your body in seconds. Henry's forge, hauled up through tremendous effort and constant danger, struggles to maintain proper temperature. As wind gusts threaten to scatter its coal and disrupt the careful thermal balance required for effective rivet heating, the portable nature of these elevated forges means they lack the thermal mass and wind protection of their ground-level counterparts, making Henry's job exponentially more difficult as both altitude and advancing darkness conspire against him. Physical act of throwing and catching hot rivets becomes increasingly dangerous as shadows deepen across the work area. Jean-Claude must now track the glowing projectiles against a background that shifts constantly between light and shadow, making depth perception problematic and timing critical. A rivet that appears clearly visible against a sunlit section of framework can suddenly disappear into shadow mid-flight, requiring split-second adjustments that test the limits of human reflexes. The leather gloves that provide essential protection against heat also reduce tactile sensitivity, creating a dangerous trade-off between burn prevention and grip security that becomes more pronounced as fatigue accumulates throughout the day. Marcel's task of positioning and holding rivets steady while you operate the pneumatic driver requires increasing amounts of concentration as the work environment becomes more hostile. The iron bars he uses to steady the rivets become painfully cold to hold, even through thick gloves. And the metal's tendency to conduct heat away from his hands creates a gradual numbness that makes fine motor control difficult. When working in shadowed areas, he must rely increasingly on touch rather than sight to ensure proper rivet alignment, a skill that takes months to develop and can mean the difference between a properly secured joint and a structural weakness that could compromise the entire section. Your own work with the pneumatic riveting gun becomes exponentially more challenging as light conditions deteriorate. The compressed air lines that power the equipment become stiff and unwieldy in the cold, requiring greater physical effort to maneuver into position. The gun itself, always heavy and difficult to control, seems to gain weight as fatigue accumulates in your shoulders and arms. Most critically, Precise positioning required for effective rivet driving becomes increasingly difficult as shadows obscure the visual cues that guide your work. A misaligned rivet gun can damage the structural element it's supposed to strengthen, while a poorly driven rivet creates a weak point that could fail catastrophically under load. The acoustic environment of the tower changes dramatically as evening approaches. The normal daytime cacophony of construction noise becomes muffled and distorted by the cold air, creating an oddly intimate soundscape where individual voices and specific tool sounds become more distinct. The ring of metal on metal takes on a different quality in the thin December air. The constant background hum of the city below seems to fade as Paris begins its transition from day to evening activities. This acoustic shift affects communication between work gangs, as shouted instructions that carry clearly during the day become difficult to distinguish against the altered sonic backdrop of approaching night. Wind patterns also change as the sun sets, creating new hazards for workers operating at extreme heights. The thermal differences between the warming earth and the cold iron framework generate unpredictable air currents that can arrive suddenly and without warning. A gust that might be merely uncomfortable at ground level becomes potentially lethal when it strikes a man balanced on a narrow iron beam 200 feet above the cobblestones. These evening wind shifts have claimed several lives during the tower's construction, and experienced workers develop an almost supernatural sensitivity to atmospheric changes that might signal incoming weather hazards. The social dynamics among the work crews undergo their own transformation as evening approaches. The camaraderie that characterizes daytime work gives way to a more focused, serious atmosphere as men understand that the day's most dangerous hours lie ahead. Conversations become more tactical, focused on immediate safety concerns rather than the broader topics that occupy daytime discussions. Jokes and casual banter fade as concentration becomes paramount. And the shared understanding that survival depends on perfect execution creates a tension that is almost palpable. As darkness continues to advance, decision of when to begin. The descent becomes a matter of life and death. Judgment that weighs productivity against safety and calculations that would horrify modern observers. Foremen, under pressure to maintain construction schedules that allow no accommodation for weather or seasonal variations, push crews to continue working until visibility becomes so poor that accidents become inevitable rather than merely probable. The result is a daily game of industrial Russian roulette where workers must navigate increasingly treacherous conditions in pursuit of wages that barely provide subsistence-level survival. The descent itself represents perhaps the most dangerous aspect of the entire working day. Fatigue combines with failing light to create conditions that claim lives with ruthless regularity. The series of ladders, scaffolds, and improvised walkways that connect the upper working levels to ground level become death traps as exhausted men attempt to navigate obstacles that challenge them even when fresh and working in full daylight. Handholds that seem secure in the morning may have loosened during the day's thermal cycling, while ice formation from condensation creates slippery surfaces that offer no warning before they betray their victims. The ladder systems themselves represent marvels of improvised engineering that would terrify modern safety inspectors. Constructed from whatever materials happen to be available, they often consist of wooden planks lashed to iron framework with rope that may have been exposed to sparks, extreme temperatures, and constant stress throughout the working day. The ladders sway and flex under the weight of multiple workers, creating a dynamic load situation where the movement of one person affects the stability experienced by everyone else using the same system. Henry faces particular challenges during the evening descent. He must supervise the careful transport of his portable forge and associated equipment down through multiple levels of increasingly unstable scaffolding. The forge, still retaining heat from the day's work, creates thermal hazards for anyone who comes into contact with it, while its weight and awkward shape make it difficult to maneuver through through the narrow spaces between structural elements. A dropped forge could kill workers on lower levels while simultaneously destroying equipment that represents significant investment for the construction company. Jean-Claude's hands, battered by a full day of catching red-hot rivets, often lack the grip strength necessary for safe ladder navigation by evening. The repeated thermal shock of grasping objects heated to nearly 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit creates cumulative damage that manifests as reduced sensation and compromised motor control. During the descent, he must rely increasingly on arm strength and careful foot placement to compensate for hands that may no longer provide reliable grip security. Marcel, exhausted from hours of holding heavy iron bars steady while pneumatic drivers hammer rivets into place, faces his own unique challenges during the evening climb down. A constant vibration transmitted through his tools has left his arms and shoulders aching, while the precise motor control required for safe ladder navigation becomes increasingly difficult as accumulated fatigue affects his coordination. The iron bars and other tools he must carry down add weight and awkwardness to an already dangerous journey. For yourself, the evening descent represents the culmination of a day spent fighting the pneumatic, riveting guns, relentless vibration, and massive weight. Your shoulders burn with the accumulated stress of controlling 40 pounds of violently shaking metal for 8 hours or more, while your hands struggle to maintain the grip strength necessary for safe ladder navigation. The tools you must carry down, spare parts for the pneumatic system, maintenance equipment, personal gear, transform the descent into a complex logistical challenge where a single dropped item could become a deadly projectile. Weather conditions during the evening descent often prove more treacherous than those experienced during the working day. As temperatures drop with the setting sun, condensation begins to form on metal surfaces, creating a thin layer of moisture that can freeze almost instantly in December's bitter cold. This invisible ice coating transforms familiar handholds into slip hazards that offer no warning before they fail. Wind gusts that seemed manageable during the day become potentially lethal when combined with fatigue, reduced visibility, and the complex maneuvering required to navigate ladder systems while carrying tools and equipment. The psychological pressure of the evening descent creates its own hazards as workers, exhausted by a full day of demanding physical labor, must summon reserves of concentration and energy for what may be the day's most dangerous activity. The knowledge that home, warmth, and rest lie just a few hundred feet below creates a powerful incentive to rush through safety procedures that require careful, methodical execution. This tension between the desire for rapid descent and the need for extreme caution has contributed to numerous accidents where experienced workers made fatal errors in judgment during the final minutes of their working day. The tower's framework itself seems to become more hostile as darkness advances, transforming familiar structural elements into obstacles that challenge even experienced workers. Navigation skills. Shadows create false visual cues that can lead to missteps, while the growing darkness makes it difficult to distinguish between solid surfaces and empty space. The geometric complexity of the iron latwork, impressive as an engineering achievement, becomes a maze of potential hazards when viewed through the lens of exhausted workers trying to find safe passage to ground level. Observers, watching from the safety of the Champ de Mars, often remark on the almost supernatural appearance of the tower workers during their evening descent. Small figures moving against the darkening sky seem to defy natural law as they navigate a three-dimensional puzzle, iron and shadow, that appears impossible to traverse safely. The occasional spark from a portable forge or the glow of a safety lantern creates brief points of light that illuminate the human drama being played out hundreds of feet above the earth, while the constant sound of boots on metal and the occasional shouted warning drift down like messages from another world. The daily statistics of injuries and fatalities kept with bureaucratic precision by the construction company's medical staff tell the grim story of industrial progress measured in human cost. Minor injuries, cuts, burns, bruises, and sprains occur so frequently they merit only cursory documentation, while more serious accidents that remove workers from active duty for extended periods are recorded with the same dispassionate attention given to equipment maintenance schedules. Deaths, when they occur, are noted primarily for their impact on construction timelines, with replacement workers typically beginning the next morning after a brief delay for administrative processing. Yet, despite these harsh realities, or perhaps because of them, it's the men who survive each day's descent from the tower's growing heights develop a camaraderie forged in shared peril that extends far beyond the normal bonds of working-class solidarity. They understand, in ways that ground-level workers cannot comprehend, what it means to trust their lives to the skill and attention of their colleagues. And this understanding creates relationships that often last long after the tower's completion. The shared experience of daily proximity to death, combined with the pride that comes from participating in the creation of something unprecedented in human history, imbues their dangerous work with a significance that transcends mere wage labor and approaches the realm of the heroic, even as society at large regards their efforts with skepticism, contempt, or open hostility. While workers risk their lives daily in the iron framework above, the man whose vision drives this unprecedented construction sits in his comfortable office on the Rue des Prônés, surrounded by the trappings of bourgeois respectability that belied the revolutionary nature of his engineering ambitions. Alexander Gustav Eiffel, born Gustav Bonackhausen, did Eiffel in the provincial city of Dijon 55 years earlier, has spent decades building a reputation as one of Europe's most innovative structural engineers, yet nothing in his previous career has prepared him for the storm of controversy that now surrounds his greatest project. The office itself reflects the methodical precision that characterizes both Eiffel's personality and his approach to engineering challenges. Technical drawings cover every available wall surface, showing not only the tower's final configuration, but also the hundreds of intermediate calculations required to ensure that iron and wind, weight and stress, ambition and physics can coexist in harmony 300 meters above the Parisian streets. Tables groan under the weight of engineering manuals, correspondence from contractors and suppliers, and the endless bureaucratic documentation required to navigate the intersection of private enterprise and government oversight that defines major public works projects in the Third Republic. But scattered among these technical documents lies evidence of a more personal struggle, letters from prominent artists, architects, and intellectuals that arrive daily, each one more vitriolic than the last in its condemnation of Eiffel's Iron Tower. The language employed in these attacks goes far beyond professional disagreement, venturing into personal insult and character assassination that would be remarkable even in an age when public discourse regularly descended to levels that modern observers would find shocking. Eiffel reads each letter carefully, filing them with the same methodical attention he gives to stress calculations and wind load analyses, perhaps understanding that history will judge not only his engineering achievement, but also the cultural battle being waged around it. The opposition to Eiffel's Tower has crystallized around a petition published in Le Temps on February 14, 1887, signed by some of the most prominent cultural figures in French society. The document, formally titled Protest Against the Tower of Monsieur Eiffel, reads like a declaration of war against industrial modernity itself, couching aesthetic objections in language that reveals deeper anxieties about the direction of French civilization. The signatories include names that define the cultural establishment of the era. Writers like Guy de Maupassant and Alexandre Dumas Fields. Architects like Charles Garnier, who designed the Paris Opera, and painters whose work graces the salons that set artistic taste for the entire nation. The petition's language reveals the intensity of feeling that Eiffel's project has aroused among those who consider themselves guardians of French cultural tradition. They describe the tower as a useless and monstrous Eiffel Tower that would dominate Paris like a gigantic black smokestack, croaking under its barbarous mass Notre Dame, the Tour Saint-Jacques, the Louvre, the Dome of Les Invalides, the Arc de Triomphe, all of our humiliated monuments. This litany of beloved landmarks serves as a catalog of everything the cultural elite believes the tower threatens: history, its tradition, religious faith, military glory, and artistic achievement, all supposedly cowering before the advance of industrial utilitarianism. But the personal attacks on Eiffel himself prove even more revealing of the class and cultural anxieties that drive the opposition to his project. Critics regularly refer to him as a mere tradesman, a mechanic whose proper place lies in workshops and factories, rather than among the architects and artists who shape public monuments. The distinction between engineer and architect, largely meaningless to modern observers, carries enormous social significance in 1880s France, where professional hierarchies reflect broader assumptions about the relationship between practical utility and cultural value. The newspaper Le Figaro provides a particularly venomous platform for attacks on both Eiffel personally and his tower generally. Critics writing in its pages describe the structure as a metal asparagus, a factory chimney under construction, and a ridiculous tower that would look like a giant exclamation point over Paris. The sexual imagery that creeps into many of these attacks descriptions of the tower as a iron phallus or metallic violation of the Parisian skyline suggests that opposition runs deeper than mere aesthetic disagreement, touching on fears about industrial modernity's assault on traditional notions of beauty, proportion, and cultural hierarchy. Eiffel's response to these attacks reveals both the confidence of a man who understands his technical mastery and the psychological toll of sustained public abuse. In letters to friends and colleagues, he maintains that his critics fail to appreciate the tower's structural elegance and mathematical beauty, arguing that engineering principles properly applied create their own aesthetic that transcends conventional notions of architectural decoration. He frequently compares his tower to the great engineering achievements of antiquity: the pyramids, Roman aqueducts, Gothic cathedrals, of which faced similar criticism during their construction, but eventually won acceptance through the simple passage of time that allows revolutionary innovations to become familiar landmarks. Yet private correspondence also reveals moments of doubt and frustration that Eiffel rarely allows to surface in his public statements. Letters to his daughter Claire describe sleepless nights spent wondering whether the cultural and political opposition to his project might ultimately prove strong enough to halt construction even after significant resources have been invested. He worries about the impact of sustained negative publicity on his other business interests. His clients begin to question whether association with such a controversial figure might damage their own reputations. The technical challenges of the tower's construction provide Eiffel with refuge from the cultural controversies that swirl around his project, allowing him to focus on problems that yield to mathematical analysis rather than the more intractable difficulties of public opinion and artistic taste. His office becomes a command center where engineering challenges are dissected with surgical precision. Each potential problem addressed through careful calculation and innovative design solutions that push the boundaries of what 19th century materials and construction techniques can achieve. The wind load calculations alone represent a breakthrough in structural engineering that will influence building design for decades to come. Previous large structures had been built primarily to resist gravitational forces, their own weight, and the loads they were designed to carry. But a tower 300 meters tall presents unprecedented challenges in terms of wind resistance, requiring Eiffel to develop entirely new mathematical models for predicting how atmospheric forces will interact with its iron framework. The elegant curve of the tower's profile reflects not aesthetic choice, but rather the mathematical optimization required to ensure that wind pressure is distributed evenly across the structure rather than concentrated at points that could cause catastrophic failure. The metallurgical challenges prove equally complex as the tower pushes the limits of what contemporary iron production can achieve. Each of the 18,038 individual pieces that comprise the structure must be manufactured to tolerances that test the capabilities of 1880s industrial processes, while the 2.5 million rivets that hold everything together must be produced in quantities that strain the capacity of French metalworking industries. Eiffel's correspondence with suppliers reveals the constant negotiation required to balance cost, quality, and delivery schedules while maintaining the precise specifications that ensure structural integrity. But perhaps the most significant challenge Eiffel faces involves the intersection of engineering, innovation, and bureaucratic oversight in a political system that struggles to accommodate projects that transcend traditional categories. The tower exists in a regulatory gray area between public monument and private enterprise, between architectural project and engineering experiment, between temporary exhibition structure and permanent addition to the Parisian skyline. Each government ministry involved in overseeing the project brings its own priorities and concerns, creating a complex web of approvals, inspections, reports that must be navigated while construction proceeds on an unforgiving timeline. The financial pressures surrounding the project add another layer of complexity to Eiffel's daily concerns. While the government has committed to funding the tower's construction as part of the 1889 Exposition Universelle, the actual disbursement of funds depends on meeting construction milestones and satisfying bureaucratic requirements that can change without warning as political priorities shift. Eiffel has invested significant personal resources in the project, betting his engineering firm's financial future on the successful completion of a structure that many observers predict would collapse catastrophically long before reaching its intended height. Labor management presents its own unique challenges. Eiffel must balance the need for skilled workers capable of performing dangerous work at extreme heights against the cost pressures that constrain every aspect of the project. The high rate of worker injuries and fatalities creates both moral and practical problems. Skilled riveting crews represent significant investments in training and experience that are lost when workers fall to their deaths, while the constant need to recruit and train replacements adds both cost and delay to an already complex construction process. The psychological pressure of managing such a controversial project, while dealing with unprecedented technical challenges, begins to take its toll on Eiffel's health and personal relationships. Friends note that he has aged noticeably since construction began, developing the drawn appearance and nervous habits of a man carrying responsibilities that exceed normal human capacity to manage. His wife, Marguerite, worries about the impact of sustained stress on her husband's constitution, particularly as the attacks in the press become increasingly personal and vindictive. Yet, despite these pressures, or perhaps because of them, Eiffel throws himself into the technical aspects of the project with an intensity that borders on obsession. His office hours extend deep into the night as he reviews calculations, proves design modifications, and responds to the constant stream of training questions and problems that arise during construction. He develops an almost supernatural ability to visualize the three-dimensional implications of engineering decisions, mentally rotating complex structural assemblies to identify potential problems before they manifest in the physical world. The tower becomes more than a construction project for Eiffel. It represents the culmination of a career spent pushing the boundaries of what structural engineering can achieve, and, perhaps more importantly, a test of whether technical innovation can triumph over cultural conservatism in a society struggling to define its relationship with industrial modernity. Success will establish him as one of the great engineers of his generation, while failure will vindicate his critics and potentially destroy both his professional reputation and his business enterprise. As 1888 draws to a close, and the tower continues its relentless growth toward the Parisian sky. Eiffel finds himself caught between the daily satisfaction of watching his vision take physical form and the growing anxiety. Even technical success might not be enough to overcome the cultural and political forces arrayed against his project. The iron framework rising above the Champ de Mars represents not just an engineering achievement, but a battleground where competing visions of French civilization will ultimately be decided, with Eiffel's personal and professional fate hanging in the balance alongside the tower's structural integrity. The winter of 1888 transforms the controversy surrounding Eiffel's tower from a genteel disagreement among cultural elites into a full-scale war of public opinion that revealed the deep fractures running through French society as the 19th century draws toward its close. What began as criticism from artists and architects has metastasized into a broader cultural conflict that engages everyone from radical politicians to conservative clergy. From working-class laborers to aristocratic salon hostesses, each group finding in the tower's iron framework a symbol for their particular hopes and fears about the direction of modern civilization. The Parisian press, always eager for controversies that sell newspapers and provide material for editorial commentary, seizes upon the tower debate with enthusiasm that borders on the predatory. Le Figaro, catering to conservative readers who prefer their culture refined and their innovations gradual, publishes daily attacks on the project that grow increasingly hysterical as the structure continues to rise. Despite mounting opposition, the newspaper's critics describe the tower in language typically reserved for natural disasters or foreign invasions, calling it a metallic plague upon the landscape and an industrial cancer that threatens to metastasize across the entire city. But the conservative press represents only one voice in a cacophony of competing opinions that fracture along lines of class, politics, and generation in ways that reveal the complex tensions underlying Third Republic society. L'Intransigeant, speaking for radical Republicans who see in the tower a symbol of democratic progress and technological advancement, celebrates Eiffel's project as proof that French engineering can compete with any nation on Earth. Their writers describe the tower as a monument to the common man's ingenuity and an iron declaration of independence from the dead hand of aristocratic tradition. The religious press approaches the controversy through the lens of theological concern, with Catholic publications expressing alarm at what they perceive as humanity's prideful attempt to challenge divine authority through the construction of a structure that reaches toward heaven itself. Articles in La Croix and other Catholic newspapers draw explicit parallels between Eiffel's tower and the biblical Tower of Babel, warning that such hubris inevitably invites divine retribution. These religious objections carry particular weight in a society where the relationship between church and state remains contested terrain, with Republicans suspicious of clerical influence and Catholics defensive about their role in modern France. The international dimension of the controversy adds another layer of complexity to domestic debates, as foreign observers weigh in on what they perceive as a quintessentially French project that somehow manages to embody both the nation's greatest strengths and its most troubling weaknesses. British newspapers, reflecting their country's industrial supremacy and engineering achievements, tend to view the tower with grudging admiration mixed with concern about French technological capabilities. The Times of London describes the project as an impressive, if somewhat theatrical demonstration of Gallic engineering ambition, while noting that such structures seemed more suited to the American temperament than to European sensibilities. German publications approach the tower with the mixture of respect and rivalry that characterizes Franco-German relations in the aftermath of the 1870 war and the ongoing competition for European dominance. Technical journals praise Eiffel's engineering innovations while questioning whether such resources might be better devoted to practical infrastructure projects rather than exhibition spectacles. The subtext of these critiques reflects broader anxieties about French recovery from military defeat and the implications of renewed French confidence for the European balance of power. American observers, viewing the controversy from a society that has embraced industrial modernity with fewer cultural reservations, express puzzlement at European resistance to technological innovation. Newspapers in New York and Chicago described the Parisian opposition to Eiffel's Tower as evidence of old-world stuffiness and resistance to progress. Contrasting European cultural conservatism with American willingness to embrace engineering achievements regardless of their impact on traditional aesthetic standards. This transatlantic perspective adds pressure to French debates by suggesting that opposition to the tower might signal national decline rather than cultural sophistication. The tower's impact on Parisian daily life becomes increasingly apparent as construction progresses, creating new patterns of urban behavior that reflect the project's growing influence on collective consciousness. Daily crowds gather at the Champ de Mars to witness the structure's progress, creating a form of public entertainment that transforms the construction site into an informal theater where spectators come to see both engineering marvel and cultural battleground. Street vendors adapt their offerings to serve these crowds, selling everything from postcards depicting the tower's current state to pamphlets arguing for or against its completion. The emergence of tower tourism even before the structure's completion reveals the project's power to attract attention, regardless of aesthetic judgments about its merit. Visitors from the provinces make special trips to Paris specifically to see Eiffel's Tower, while foreign tourists add the construction site to their itineraries alongside traditional landmarks like Notre Dame and the Louvre. This early evidence of popular appeal provides ammunition for supporters who argue that public fascination demonstrates the tower's ultimate value, while critics dismiss such interest as mere vulgar curiosity, unworthy of serious cultural consideration. The debates surrounding the tower begin to influence broader discussions about the proper relationship between technology and culture in modern society, with each side using the project to advance larger arguments about social progress, artistic value, and national identity. Supporters frame their defense of the tower in terms of democratic values and scientific rationalism, arguing that opposition reflects aristocratic prejudice against innovations that emerge from workshops rather than academies. They celebrate Eiffel as a representative of bourgeois achievement and technical competence, qualities they consider essential for French success in an increasingly competitive international environment. Critics counter by defending traditional standards of beauty in proportion that they argue represent accumulated wisdom about what constitutes appropriate urban development and architectural achievement. They position themselves as guardians of cultural values that transcend narrow technical considerations, arguing that a society's monuments should reflect its highest aspirations rather than its industrial capabilities. This perspective frames opposition to the tower as aesthetic sophistication rather than reactionary conservatism, claiming that true cultural advancement requires discrimination between mere novelty and genuine artistic achievement. The legal challenges to the tower's construction revealed the inadequacy of existing regulatory frameworks to deal with projects that transcend traditional categories of building and development. Several property owners near the Champ de Mars filed lawsuits claiming that the tower will damage their property values and interfere with their enjoyment of their homes, creating precedents for disputes about the rights of individuals versus the needs of public projects. These cases force courts to grapple with questions about aesthetic harm, property rights, and the government's authority to authorize projects that affect private interests. Professional architectural societies enter the fray with formal resolutions condemning the tower as a violation of established principles of urban planning and architectural harmony. The Société Centrale des Architectes Français passes a resolution describing Eiffel's project as an offense against the established canons of architectural beauty and a precedent that threatens to encourage similar violations of aesthetic principle in future public works. Such institutional opposition carries significant weight in a society where professional credentials and academic training provide important sources of cultural authority. But the tower also attracts passionate defenders among younger architects and engineers who see in Eiffel's project a liberation from academic constraints that have stifled innovation and experimentation. These supporters argue that the tower represents a new aesthetic based on structural honesty and functional efficiency, rather than historical imitation and decorative elaboration. They frame their support in terms of generational conflict, positioning themselves as representatives of modern thinking against the dead hand of traditional authority. The international engineering community watches the controversy with intense interest, understanding that the tower's fate will influence public attitudes toward large-scale catechal projects throughout Europe and beyond. Professional journals publish detailed analyses of Eiffel's structural innovations alongside commentaries on the cultural reception of his work. Recognizing that engineering advancement depends not only on technical capability, but also on social acceptance of the changes that new technologies bring to familiar environments, the debate begins to attract contributions from unexpected quarters as the project's symbolic significance expands beyond narrow questions of architecture and engineering. Feminist writers use the tower controversy to advance arguments about women's exclusion from technical professions, pointing out that the masculine world of engineering offers few opportunities for female participation in projects that shape the physical environment. Socialist politicians seize upon the tower as evidence of capitalism's ability to mobilize resources for spectacular projects while ignoring basic social needs like housing and sanitation for the working classes. Economic analyses of the tower's impact reveal both its potential benefits and costs for Parisian commerce and tourism. Supporters argue that the structure will attract visitors and investment that will benefit the entire city, while critics worry about the resources being diverted from more practical infrastructure projects. The debate over economic impact becomes entangled with broader arguments about the proper role of government in promoting industrial development and technological innovation. As the tower continues to grow throughout the winter months, reaching heights that make it visible from increasingly distant parts of the city, the controversy takes on new dimensions as Parisians must confront the daily reality of living with a structure that fundamentally alters their urban landscape. The tower's growing prominence in the city's visual profile forces even its critics to acknowledge its power to command attention, while supporters point to this visibility as evidence of the structure's potential to serve as a landmark and symbol that will define Paris for future generations. The psychological impact of the tower's presence begins to manifest in unexpected ways as Parisians adapt their daily routines and mental maps to accommodate a structure that challenges traditional notions of scale and proportion. Some residents report feelings of unease or disorientation when viewing the tower from familiar locations, as if the iron framework somehow distorts spatial relationships and makes previously comfortable urban environments feel strange and unfamiliar. Others describe a sense of excitement and pride at witnessing the creation of something genuinely unprecedented in human history. The tower's construction schedule becomes a matter of public fascination as newspapers provide regular updates on the structure's progress, creating a form of collective investment in the project's success or failure that transcends individual opinions about its artistic merit. The daily drama of workers laboring at extreme heights, combined with the constant possibility of accidents or engineering failures, transforms the construction site into a source of public entertainment that draws crowds regardless of their aesthetic judgments about the final product. By the spring of 1889, the tower nears completion and the opening of the Exposition Universelle approaches. The the intensity of public debate begins to shift from abstract arguments about cultural values to practical assessments of the structure's impact on Parisian life and French international prestige. The tower's undeniable reality forces both supporters and critics to move beyond theoretical positions toward more nuanced evaluations of how the project fits into the broader context of modern urban development and technological progress, setting the stage for the dramatic transformation of public opinion that will ultimately vindicate Eiffel's vision and establish his tower as one of the world's most beloved landmarks. The transformation of the Eiffel Tower from reviled monstrosity to beloved symbol represents one of the most remarkable reversals of public opinion in modern history, a metamorphosis that unfolds gradually through the spring and summer of 1889. As millions of visitors to the Exposition Universelle encounter Eiffel's creation not as abstract controversy, but as lived experience. The process by which hatred becomes love, opposition becomes acceptance, and cultural scandal becomes national pride reveals the complex mechanisms through which societies adapted technological innovations that initially challenged established notions of beauty, proportion, and appropriate urban development. The opening of the Exposition Universelle on May 6, 1889, marks the beginning of this transformation as visitors from around the world flood into Paris to witness the centennial celebration of the French Revolution and survey the technological achievements that the Third Republic offers as evidence of national recovery and modernization. The tower, initially conceived as a temporary gateway to the exposition grounds, suddenly finds itself thrust into service as France's primary symbol of industrial progress and engineering capability, a role that its controversial birth could never have predicted, but which its dramatic presence seems perfectly suited to fulfill. The early visitors to the tower approached the structure with a mixture of curiosity, skepticism, and barely concealed fear that reflects the broader public uncertainty about this unprecedented addition to the Parisian landscape. The elevator systems, themselves marvels of 19th century engineering, provide the first test of public confidence in Eiffel's creation as visitors must decide whether to trust their lives to mechanical devices that carry them hundreds of feet above the ground in iron cages, suspended by cables. The very act of ascending the tower becomes a demonstration of faith in technological progress that transforms casual sightseers into active participants in the Industrial Revolution's advance into daily life. The view from the tower's various levels provides visitors with perspectives on Paris that no human being has ever experienced before. It's creating a visual impact that transcends aesthetic judgments about the structure itself. From the first level platform, 190 feet above the ground, the city spreads out in a panorama that reveals urban patterns and relationships invisible from street level. The geometric precision of Haussmann's boulevard system becomes apparent from this elevation, while the organic growth of older neighborhoods creates textural contrasts that highlight the tension between planned development and a historical accident that characterizes modern Parisian urbanism. The second level, at 380 feet, provides views that extend far beyond the city proper to encompass the broader geographical context within which Paris has developed. The serpentine course of the Seine becomes visible as a continuous feature rather than a series of disconnected segments glimpsed from bridges and embankments. The hills of Montmartre and Belleville reveal their true relationship to the river valley, while distant landmarks like the Palace of Versailles appear on clear days as tiny interruptions in the suburban landscape that surrounds the capital. But it is the experience of reaching the tower's summit, nearly 1,000 feet above the streets below, that provides the most transformative encounter with Eiffel's creation. At this altitude, Paris becomes an abstract pattern of light and shadow, geometric forms and organic curves that bears little resemblance to the familiar city of daily experience. Visitors frequently report feeling simultaneously exhilarated and disoriented by this godlike perspective on human habitation, as if they have been granted temporary admission to a realm normally reserved for birds and angels. The psychological impact of these elevated views begins to influence public perception of the tower in ways that purely aesthetic arguments could never achieve. Visitors who ascend the structure as skeptics often descend as converts, not because they have changed their minds about the tower's visual appeal, but because they have experienced something genuinely unprecedented in human history. The democratization of aerial perspective, previously available only to balloonists willing to risk their lives in unstable aircraft, represents a fundamental expansion of human sensory experience that creates its own justification for the tower's existence. The international character of the exposition's audience assures that early impressions of the tower spread rapidly beyond French borders, creating a global conversation about the structure that influences domestic opinion through the peculiar mechanisms by which societies often require foreign validation before accepting their own innovations. American visitors, products of a culture that has embraced technological advancement with fewer reservations than their European counterparts, express unqualified enthusiasm for Eiffel's achievement and puzzlement at French ambivalence toward such an obvious symbol of national capability. British observers, viewing the tower through the lens of their own industrial supremacy and engineering achievements, offer more measured praise that nevertheless acknowledges the structure's technical sophistication and symbolic power. German visitors, representing France's primary rival for European dominance, find themselves in the awkward position of admiring an achievement by their competitors while maintaining appropriate skepticism about French claims to technological leadership. The complex interplay of national pride, international rivalry, and genuine appreciation for engineering excellence creates a diplomatic dimension to tower criticism that extends far beyond questions of aesthetic merit. The commercial success of the tower as a tourist attraction provides the most pragmatic argument for its continued existence, as the revenue generated by admission fees quickly demonstrates that Eiffel's creation possesses economic value regardless of its artistic merit. The long lines of visitors waiting to ascend the structure throughout the exposition period create a daily spectacle that contradicts claims about public opposition to the project. The tower's ability to attract paying customers from around the world establishes a form of market validation that proves more convincing to practical-minded Parisians than abstract arguments about architectural harmony or cultural tradition. Local businesses near the Champ de Mars quickly recognized the commercial opportunities created by the tower's popularity, leading to the rapid development of a tourist infrastructure that transforms the surrounding neighborhood. Hotels expand their capacity to accommodate visitors drawn primarily by the tower, while restaurants adjust their menus in service to appeal to international clientele eager to dine within sight of Eiffel's creation. Souvenir vendors proliferate throughout the area, offering everything from miniature tower models to postcards that allow visitors to document their encounter with this unprecedented structure. The photographic documentation of the tower and its visitors creates a new form of visual evidence that influences public opinion through the emerging power of mass-produced images. Professional photographers establish studios near the tower to capture portraits of visitors against the backdrop of Eiffel's iron framework, while amateur photographers with portable cameras document their own experiences in ways that democratize the creation of tower imagery. These photographs, reproduced in newspapers and magazines throughout Europe and America, provide visual testimony to the tower's reality and impact that proves more persuasive than written descriptions. The tower's integration into Parisian social life begins almost immediately, as the structure provides a new focal point for urban activities and rituals. Couples discover that the tower's various levels offer romantic settings for proposals and celebrations, while families find that ascending the structure together creates shared experiences that bond them through participation in something genuinely historic. The tower becomes a destination for Sunday outings and holiday excursions. It's gradually establishing itself as a normal part of Parisian recreational life rather than an exotic novelty. The artistic community, initially united in opposition to the tower, begins to fracture as some painters and writers discover that Eiffel's creation offers new opportunities for creative expression rather than simply representing a threat to traditional aesthetic values. Impressionist painters find in the tower's iron latwork and changing appearance under different lighting conditions a subject that exemplifies their interest in capturing transient visual effects. Writers begin to incorporate the tower into their descriptions of modern Parisian life, using its presence as a symbol for the broader transformations that industrial modernity brings to urban experience. The tower's impact on Parisian nightlife proves particularly significant in shifting public attitudes toward the structure, as its iron framework creates dramatic silhouettes against the evening sky that even critics acknowledge as visually striking. The installation of electric lighting systems for special occasions transforms the tower into a beacon that can be seen from miles away. It's creating a nocturnal presence that complements its daytime dominance of the urban landscape. These illuminated displays demonstrate the tower's potential to serve as a canvas for artistic expression rather than simply an engineering achievement. The gradual acceptance of the tower reflects broader changes in French society as the Third Republic consolidates its authority and establishes new relationships between tradition and innovation, culture and technology, elite opinion and popular sentiment. The tower's success challenges assumptions about the sources of aesthetic authority and the mechanisms through which societies determine what constitutes appropriate urban development. The structure's ability to win acceptance despite initial opposition from cultural elites suggests that democratic societies may develop new forms of aesthetic judgment that bypass traditional gatekeepers. The scientific community's growing interest in the tower as a platform for research provides additional justification for its continued existence beyond the exposition period. Meteorologists recognize the structure's potential as an elevated observation post for studying atmospheric conditions, while early radio experimenters see opportunities to test transmission equipment at unprecedented heights. These practical applications help transform the tower from mere spectacle into useful infrastructure that serves legitimate scientific purposes. The tower's influence on architecture and urban planning begins to manifest as other cities consider their own versions of Eiffel's achievement, creating international competition for the tallest structures and most impressive engineering feats. This competitive dynamic helps establish the tower as a symbol of national technological capability rather than simply a Parisian oddity, elevating its significance from local controversy to an international benchmark for industrial achievement. Military strategists discovered that the tower's height provides valuable advantages for observation and communication, leading to discussions about its potential role in national defense should international tensions escalate into conflict. This military dimension adds another layer of justification for the tower's continued existence, while highlighting its potential to serve practical purposes that extend far beyond tourist entertainment or artistic display. The economic impact of the tower extends beyond immediate tourism revenue to influence broader patterns of Parisian development and international trade. The structure's success as a tourist attraction demonstrates the economic potential of large-scale public works projects designed to showcase national achievements, leading to discussions about additional investments in spectacular architecture and urban improvement. Foreign businessmen visiting the exposition used the tower as evidence of French industrial capability when negotiating trade agreements and investment opportunities. The tower's transformation from cultural controversy to national symbol reflects the broader process by which modern societies adapt to technological innovations that initially challenge established norms and expectations. The speed and completeness of this transformation suggests that public opinion, while often resistant to change, can be remarkably flexible when confronted with undeniable evidence of practical success and genuine achievement. The tower's journey from hatred to love demonstrates that aesthetic judgments, despite claims to timeless validity, remain subject to revision when challenged by experiences that transcend traditional categories of evaluation. By the time the Exposition Universelle closes in October 1889, the tower has welcomed nearly 2 million visitors from around the world, establishing itself as France's most popular tourist attraction and transforming Eiffel from controversial engineer into national hero. The structure, originally scheduled for demolition after 20 years, has become so thoroughly integrated into Parisian identity that its removal becomes unthinkable, marking the complete victory of practical success over theoretical opposition and demonstrating the power of lived experience to overcome abstract prejudice in the ongoing negotiation between tradition and innovation that defines modern civilization. Far above the crowds that gather daily at the tower's base, beyond the reach of casual tourists and curious sightseers, lies one of the most remarkable secrets of Eiffel's iron masterpiece, private apartment and laboratory that the engineer has constructed for his own use at the tower summit, nearly 1,000 feet above the Parisian streets. This hidden refuge, unknown to most visitors who ascend only as far as the public observation platforms, represents Eiffel's most personal investment in his creation and serves as both a retreat from public controversy and headquarters for scientific investigations that push the boundaries of late 19th century research into previously unexplored territories. But meteorology represents only one facet of the research program that Eiffel pursues in his elevated laboratory. The tower's height and iron construction make it an ideal platform for experiments in wireless telegraphy, the emerging technology that promises to revolutionize long-distance communication by eliminating the need for physical cables and wires. Eiffel collaborates with Eugene Ducretet and other pioneers of radio transmission to test equipment that uses the tower's iron framework as a massive antenna, conducting experiments that will eventually lead to the establishment of regular wireless communication networks spanning continents. The scientific potential of the tower's unique position becomes apparent to Eiffel almost immediately after the structure's completion, as he recognizes that his creation offers research opportunities that extend far beyond its original purpose as an exhibition gateway and tourist attraction. The tower's height places it above much of the atmospheric interference that complicates ground-level observations. While its iron construction provides excellent electrical conductivity for experiments in electromagnetic phenomena. Most importantly, the tower's location in the heart of Paris ensures easy access to the scientific community and the resources necessary for sustained research programs. Eiffel's transformation from engineer to experimental scientist reflects broader trends in late 19th century intellectual life, as the boundaries between practical technology and theoretical research become increasingly fluid. His background in structural engineering provides him with mathematical skills and empirical methodology that translate readily to scientific investigation, while his success with the tower gives him both the financial resources and social credibility necessary to attract collaboration from established researchers. The Tower Laboratory becomes a unique intersection of engineering pragmatism and scientific curiosity that produces innovations in multiple fields simultaneously. The meteorological research conducted from the tower's summit contributes significantly to the development of systematic weather forecasting science. Still in its infancy during the 1890s, Eiffel's instruments record atmospheric conditions at regular intervals throughout the day and night, creating data sets that reveal patterns and relationships invisible from ground-level observations. The consistent elevation of the recording station eliminates many of the variables that complicate surface measurements, while the tower's urban location provides information about weather patterns in populated areas rather than the remote locations. Typically used for meteorological stations, wind studies prove particularly valuable, as the tower's height allows for direct measurement of air currents that affect everything from aviation experiments to urban ventilation systems. Eiffel develops specialized instruments for recording wind velocity and direction at different altitudes, creating three-dimensional maps of atmospheric movement that inform both scientific understanding and practical applications. These studies contribute to the emerging field of aerodynamics and provide essential data for early aviation pioneers who must understand air behavior to develop successful flying machines. The tower's role as a platform for radio experiments establishes Eiffel as a significant figure in the development of wireless communication technology. Working with leading researchers in electromagnetic theory, he conducts transmission tests that demonstrate the tower's effectiveness as an antenna system for long-distance wireless telegraphy. The iron framework's height and conductivity make it possible to achieve signal ranges that far exceed those available from ground-based equipment, leading to successful transmissions across hundreds of miles and establishing the foundation for established for later developments in radio, broadcasting, and long-range communication. Temperature studies from the tower reveal significant variations in atmospheric conditions at different altitudes, providing data that challenges existing theories about atmospheric structure and behavior. Eiffel's instruments record temperature differences between the tower's base and summit that vary dramatically based on seasonal conditions, time of day, and weather patterns. This information contributes to developing understanding of atmospheric stratification and the complex relationships between altitude, temperature, and air pressure that influence both weather systems and human activities at elevated locations. The Tower Laboratory attracts visiting scientists from throughout Europe and America who recognize the unique research opportunities provided by Eiffel's aerial platform. Thomas Edison makes several visits to discuss electrical experiments and examine the tower's potential for long-distance power transmission, while prominent astronomers use the elevated location for celestial observations that benefit from reduced atmospheric interference. These scientific collaborations enhance the tower's reputation as a research facility, while providing Eiffel with connections to the international scientific community that extend far beyond his original engineering profession. Atmospheric pressure. Studies conducted from the tower contribute to advancing understanding of how air pressure varies with altitude and weather conditions, providing essential data for the development of accurate altimeters and barometric instruments. Eiffel's consistent elevation allows for precise calibration of pressure measuring devices. Comparative readings taken simultaneously at the tower's base and summit reveal pressure gradients that inform both scientific theory and practical applications for surveying and navigation. The tower's scientific activities extend beyond data collection to include experimental work that tests new theories and technologies under controlled conditions. Eiffel collaborates with researchers investigating the properties of electromagnetic radiation, using the tower's height and iron construction to test theories about wave propagation and signal transmission. These experiments contribute to developing understanding of electromagnetic phenomena that will later prove essential for radio, television, and other wireless communication technologies. Gravitational studies benefit from the tower's height, as researchers use the structure to investigate how gravitational effects vary with elevation above sea level. While these variations prove minute, their measurement requires the precision and consistency that the tower's fixed elevation provides. Such studies contribute to advancing understanding of gravitational theory and provide practical information for surveying and navigation. Applications that must account for gravitational variations in their calculations. The Tower Laboratories. Research into atmospheric electricity proves particularly valuable for understanding lightning and other electrical phenomena associated with weather systems. The iron structure's height makes it an excellent conductor for atmospheric electrical activity. allowing researchers to study electrical discharges and measure atmospheric electrical potential under various weather conditions. This research contributes both to scientific understanding of atmospheric electricity and to practical developments in lightning protection systems for buildings and other structures. Acoustic studies conducted from the tower reveal how sound transmission varies with altitude and atmospheric conditions. It's providing information valuable for both scientific understanding and practical applications in communication and navigation. Researchers use the tower's height to study how sound waves behave at different elevations, contributing to developing understanding of acoustic phenomena that influences everything from architectural design to military signaling systems. Social and intellectual environment of the Tower Laboratory creates a unique space where engineering pragmatism meets scientific curiosity, attracting researchers and inventors who benefit from both the tower's physical advantages and Eiffel's growing reputation as a patron of scientific research. The laboratory becomes a gathering place for innovative thinkers who use the tower's unique properties to advance their own research while contributing to the broader understanding of atmospheric, electrical, and communication phenomena that will shape 20th century technology. As the 1890s progress and the tower's scientific activities expand, Eiffel's hidden laboratory establishes itself as one of Europe's most important research facilities, contributing significant discoveries while demonstrating the tower's value as something far more substantial than a mere tourist attraction or engineering curiosity. The transformation of the tower's summit from private retreat into scientific headquarters reflects the broader evolution of the structure from controversial exhibition piece into essential urban infrastructure that serves multiple purposes simultaneously. The guest book maintained in Eiffel's private apartment reads like a catalog of the most brilliant minds and influential figures of the late 19th century. As word of the tower's unique scientific facilities and extraordinary location spreads throughout the international community of researchers, inventors, and cultural luminaries, the privilege of ascending to Eiffel's hidden retreat becomes one of the most coveted invitations in European society, not merely because of the social prestige associated with such exclusivity, but because the experience provides access to perspectives and opportunities that exist nowhere else on Earth. Thomas Edison's visits to the Tower Laboratory represent some of the most significant meetings between two of the era's greatest innovators. As the American inventor and the French engineer discover shared interests that extend far beyond their individual achievements. Edison arrives at the tower with characteristic intensity, his mind racing with possibilities for harnessing the structure's unique properties for electrical experiments that could revolutionize power transmission and communication technology. The conversations between these two titans of industrial innovation often continue late into the evening, their voices carrying across the iron framework as they discuss theories and test equipment that pushes the boundaries of contemporary scientific understanding. During one memorable visit in 1892, Edison collaborates with Eiffel on experiments designed to test the tower's potential as a conductor for long-distance electrical transmission. They rig the iron framework with specialized equipment that transforms the entire structure into a massive electrical instrument. Conducting tests that demonstrate the feasibility of using tall metal structures as pneumatics components in electrical distribution systems. The success of these experiments influences Edison's later work on urban electrical networks, while providing Eiffel with valuable data about the electrical properties of his creation. The presence of prominent astronomers at the tower reflects the structure's value as an elevated observation platform that places scientific instruments above much of the atmospheric interference that complicates ground-level observations. Camille Flammarion, France's most celebrated popularizer of astronomy, makes regular visits to conduct celestial observations from the tower's summit, taking advantage of the reduced atmospheric turbulence and light pollution available at such heights. But his telescopic observations from the tower contribute to advancing knowledge of planetary motion and stellar phenomena while demonstrating the structure's utility for serious scientific research. International delegations of engineers and architects arrive regularly to study the tower's construction techniques and structural innovations, recognizing that Eiffel's achievement represents a breakthrough in building technology that will influence large-scale construction projects throughout the world. Representatives from the British Institution of Civil Engineers spend days examining the tower's riveted connections and wind resistance features, taking detailed measurements and photographs that will inform their own country's infrastructure development. German engineering societies send technical missions to study the tower's foundation systems and structural analysis methods, acknowledging that French engineering has achieved something unprecedented in human construction. Artists and writers, initially among the tower's harshest critics, gradually discover that Eiffel's creation offers unique perspectives that enrich their creative work in unexpected ways. Guy de Maupassant, despite his public opposition to the tower, privately admits to Eiffel that the view from the summit provides literary inspiration that ground-level experience could never offer. The aerial perspective on Parisian life reveals patterns and relationships that inform his later stories about urban society. While the tower's scientific atmosphere encourages Kane to incorporate technological themes into his writing, the tower's guests register records, visits from members of European royal families who come to witness firsthand what has become France's most famous engineering achievement. Prince Edward of Wales, later King Edward VII, spends an afternoon in Eiffel's apartment discussing the tower's potential military applications while enjoying the unprecedented view of the French countryside. The prince's technical curiosity and genuine appreciation for engineering innovation help establish the tower's legitimacy among European elites who initially viewed it with skepticism or disdain. Scientific conferences held in the tower laboratory bring together researchers from multiple disciplines who benefit from both the structure's unique properties and the intellectual atmosphere that Eiffel's hospitality creates. Meteorologists, physicists, chemists, mathematicians gather to share research findings and collaborate on experiments that take advantage of the tower's height, electrical conductivity, and isolation from ground-level interference. These meetings establish the tower as an important center for scientific networking and collaboration that extends far beyond French national boundaries. The social dynamics of these elevated gatherings create a unique environment where protocol and hierarchy seem suspended by the extraordinary circumstances of meeting nearly 1,000 feet above the earth. Conversations that might be constrained by social convention at ground level flow more freely in the tower's rarefied atmosphere. The shared experience of ascending to such heights creates bonds of common adventure that transcend normal social boundaries. Politicians discuss policy with scientists, artists exchange ideas with engineers, and international visitors find themselves collaborating across national lines that seem less significant when viewed from such elevated perspectives. Eiffel himself proves to be an engaging host who combines technical expertise with social grace, guiding his guests through explanations of the tower's construction while ensuring their comfort in an environment that many find initially disorienting. His ability to translate complex engineering concepts into accessible language makes him an effective ambassador for technological innovation, while his genuine enthusiasm for scientific research creates an infectious atmosphere of intellectual curiosity that encourages guests to explore new ideas and approaches. The culinary arrangements for these elevated gatherings present unique logistical challenges that Eiffel solves with characteristic ingenuity and attention to detail. Food and beverages must be transported hundreds of feet above ground level using the same elevator systems that carry visitors, requiring careful planning and coordination to ensure that refreshments arrive at proper temperatures and in suitable condition. Eiffel employs specially trained staff who understand the peculiar demands of service at such heights, creating dining experiences that combine gastronomic sophistication with the adventure of eating suspended in the sky above Paris. The acoustic properties of the tower's iron framework create unusual audio effects during these gatherings. Its conversations seem to echo and reverberate through the metal structure in ways that its participants find both fascinating and slightly unnerving. The sound of wind moving through the tower's latwork provides a constant background accompaniment to discussions, while the distant noise of the city far below creates an otherworldly atmosphere that enhances the sense of separation from ordinary terrestrial concerns. Weather conditions significantly influence the character of these elevated meetings. Changes in atmospheric pressure, temperature, and wind patterns create dramatic variations in the tower's environment that affect both scientific observations and social interactions. Clear days provide spectacular visibility that extends to the horizon in all directions, while foggy conditions can completely isolate the tower summit in a private world of clouds and mist that seems disconnected from earthly reality. Storms transform the tower into a conductor for atmospheric electrical activity that provides thrilling but potentially dangerous spectacles for observers brave enough to remain at such heights during severe weather. As the tower's reputation as a scientific and social center continues to grow throughout the 1890s, Eiffel finds himself transformed from controversial engineer into international celebrity. Its elevated retreat becomes one of Europe's most important gathering places for innovative thinkers and influential leaders. The success of these elevated meetings demonstrates the tower's evolution from architectural controversy into a central infrastructure that serves multiple purposes while creating opportunities for intellectual collaboration that would be impossible anywhere else on Earth. The daily rhythm of life in Eiffel's aerial laboratory creates a unique environment where the boundaries between theoretical science and practical application dissolve in the rarefied atmosphere nearly 1,000 feet above the Parisian streets. Each dawn brings new opportunities for observation and experimentation as atmospheric conditions shift and change, providing an ever-varying canvas for scientific investigation that transforms the tower's summit into a living laboratory where discoveries emerge from the intersection of human curiosity and unprecedented physical circumstances. The meteorological observations conducted from the tower reveal patterns and phenomena that ground-based stations could never detect. The elevated position provides access to atmospheric layers and conditions that exist only at extreme heights above urban areas. Eiffel's instruments record temperature inversions, shear effects, and pressure variations that occur hundreds of feet above the city, creating datasets that advance understanding of urban meteorology and atmospheric physics. The consistent elevation of the observation point eliminates many variables that complicate surface measurements, while the tower's location in the heart of Paris provides information about weather patterns in densely populated areas rather than the remote locations typically used for meteorological research. The tower's role as a platform for early radio experiments transforms it to one of the world's first broadcasting centers as Eiffel collaborates with pioneers of wireless communication to test transmission equipment that uses the iron framework as a massive antenna. The structure's height and electrical conductivity create ideal conditions for radio signal propagation, allowing researchers to achieve transmission ranges that far exceed those possible with ground-based equipment. These experiments establish fundamental principles of radio communication while demonstrating the tower's potential as a transmission facility that will eventually serve commercial broadcasting services. Atmospheric electricity studies conducted from the tower provide unprecedented data about electrical phenomena in the upper atmosphere. As the iron structure acts as a natural lightning rod that attracts and conducts electrical discharges during thunderstorms, researchers develop specialized instruments to measure atmospheric electrical potential and study the behavior of electrical charges at different altitudes, contributing to advancing understanding of atmospheric electricity. while providing practical information for lightning protection systems. The tower's height places it in the zone where most lightning activity occurs, making it an ideal natural laboratory for studying electrical storms and their effects. The acoustic experiments conducted from the tower reveal how sound transmission varies with altitude and atmospheric conditions, providing valuable information for both scientific understanding and practical applications in communication and navigation. Researchers use the tower's height to study sound wave propagation, co-effects, and the relationship between atmospheric density and acoustic transmission. These studies contribute to developing understanding of atmospheric acoustics, while providing practical information for military signaling systems, foghorn placement, and early aviation communication needs. Gravitational measurements taken from the tower contribute to advancing precision in geodetic surveying and gravitational theory, as the structure's fixed elevation provides a stable platform for instruments that measure minute variations in gravitational force. While these variations prove extremely small, their detection requires the stability and precision that the tower's rigid framework provides. Such measurements contribute to understanding gravitational anomalies and provide essential data for accurate mapping and surveying applications that must account for gravitational variations in their calculations. The tower's scientific activities extend into the realm of early aviation research as experimenters recognize the structure's potential as a platform for studying flight and atmospheric conditions relevant to powered flight. Wind studies conducted from various levels of the tower provide essential data about air currents and turbulence patterns that inform early aircraft design, while the tower's height allows for direct observation of bird flight patterns and atmospheric phenomena that affect flying machines. These studies contribute to the emerging science of aerodynamics while providing practical information for aviation pioneers. Optical experiments conducted from the tower take advantage of the elevated position to study light transmission through the atmosphere and the effects of atmospheric conditions on visibility and optical phenomena. Researchers use the tower's height to investigate how light behaves at different altitudes while studying atmospheric effects that influence astronomical observation, photography, and long-distance visual communication. The reduced atmospheric interference available at the tower's elevation provides ideal conditions for optical research that requires clear viewing conditions. The tower's role in advancing photographic technology proves significant as researchers use the elevated position to test new camera equipment and photographic techniques under challenging conditions. The combination of height, wind, and vibration creates demanding test conditions that push photographic equipment to its limits, while providing opportunities to capture images from perspectives never before available to human observers. These photographic experiments contribute to advancing camera technology, while creating a visual record of atmospheric conditions and urban development that proves valuable for both scientific and historical purposes. Magnetic field studies conducted from the tower provide data about the Earth's magnetic field variations and the effects of large ion structures on magnetic compass readings. Researchers use the tower's massive iron to study magnetic anomalies while investigating how metal structures affect navigation instruments. These studies contribute to advancing understanding of terrestrial magnetism while providing practical information for navigation and surveying applications that must account for magnetic variations in their calculations. The integration of multiple research programs within the tower's limited space requires careful coordination and resource sharing that creates a unique, collaborative environment where researchers from different disciplines interact regularly and share equipment, techniques, and discoveries. This interdisciplinary approach leads to cross-fertilization of ideas and methods that advance multiple fields simultaneously while demonstrating the value of collaborative research facilities that serve multiple scientific purposes. The tower's Research activities attract international attention and collaboration, as scientists from around the world recognize the unique opportunities provided by Eiffel's elevated laboratory. Foreign researchers request access to the tower's facilities while proposing collaborative studies that take advantage of the structure's unique properties. These international collaborations enhance the tower's reputation as a research center while promoting scientific exchange and cooperation across national boundaries. The technological innovations developed for use in the tower's challenging environment often find applications in other fields as researchers adapt equipment and techniques to work under conditions of extreme height, wind, and vibration. The specialized instruments and methods developed for tower research contribute to advancing scientific instrumentation while providing solutions for other high-altitude and harsh environment. Research applications. The documentation and publication of research results from the tower creates a body of scientific literature that establishes the structure's credentials as a legitimate research facility while disseminating discoveries to the broader scientific community. Research papers describing tower-based studies appear in scientific journals throughout Europe and America, helping to establish the tower's reputation as a center for innovative research while promoting international recognition of French scientific capability. The tower's evolution from controversial exhibition structure to a central research facility demonstrates the potential for large-scale engineering projects to serve multiple purposes simultaneously while creating opportunities for scientific advancement that their original designers never anticipated. The success of the tower's scientific mission provides a model for integrating research capabilities into major infrastructure projects while demonstrating the value of maintaining facilities that serve both practical and scientific purposes over extended periods. As the sun sets behind the Eiffel Tower on a warm evening in July 1889, casting long shadows across the exposition grounds and painting the iron framework in shades of amber and gold, the carriages of Paris's social elite began their elegant procession along the Avenue de Suffren toward Maxim's, the restaurant that has become the unofficial headquarters for those who wish to see and be seen during the height of the exposition season. The irony is palpable and intentional. These arbiters of taste and culture, many of whom spent months denouncing the tower as an abomination against civilized society, now gather nightly within sight of Eiffel's creation to conduct the social rituals that define their world. Their crystal glasses raised in toasts that carefully avoid acknowledging the iron giant that looms over their festivities. The restaurant itself epitomizes the Belle Epoque's commitment to luxury and artistic refinement. Its Art Nouveau interiors, creating an atmosphere of sophisticated decadence that serves as both refuge from and counterpoint to the industrial modernity that the exposition celebrates. Red velvet banquettes curve around intimate tables set with baccarat crystal and Sèvres porcelain, while electric chandeliers cast warm light over walls decorated with paintings that celebrate the pastoral and mythological themes that offer escape from the mechanical realities of modern life. The soft strains of a string quartet provide musical accompaniment to conversations. It's conducted in the cultured tones of the educated bourgeoisie and aristocratic survivors who have adapted their traditional privileges to the democratic realities of Third Republic society. At a corner table positioned to provide the best view of both the restaurant's elegant interior and the exposition grounds, visible through tall windows, Count Henry de Montclair adjusts his white tie and surveys the evening's gathering with the practiced eye of a man who has spent decades navigating the complex social hierarchies that govern Parisian high society. Born into an ancient noble family that traces its lineage to the Crusades, the Count represents the aristocratic tradition that views the tower's construction as symbolic of everything wrong with contemporary French civilization, of technical competence over cultural refinement, its celebration of industrial achievement over artistic accomplishment. and its democratic accessibility to anyone willing to pay the admission price rather than restriction to those blessed with appropriate breeding and education. The evening's conversation flows smoothly as the vintage champagne that accompanies each course of the elaborate dinner, touching on topics that reveal the complex anxieties underlying elite opposition to the tower and what it represents. The guests discuss recent developments in art and literature with the easy familiarity of individuals who consider themselves guardians of cultural standards, while carefully avoiding direct mention of the iron structure that dominates the view from their table. When the tower does enter their conversation, it appears obliquely through references to inappropriate urban development, the decline of aesthetic standards, and the unfortunate influence of industrial thinking on matters that require artistic sensibility. Madame du Bois regales the table with an account of her recent visit to the salon. She was pleased to observe that serious artists continue to pursue classical themes and techniques, despite the distraction of technological novelties that some observers mistakenly consider relevant to artistic expression. Her description of the paintings she has recently purchased emphasizes their connection to historical traditions and their celebration of timeless human experiences rather than the ephemeral concerns of industrial society. She speaks with particular enthusiasm about a landscape painting that depicts the French countryside as it existed before the intrusion of railways and factories, praising the artist's ability to capture the eternal essence of rural life that remains unchanged despite the superficial alterations wrought by modern technology. Count de Montclair shares observations from his recent travels through Germany and Austria, where he was gratified to discover that aristocratic society continues to maintain traditional standards of taste and cultural authority. Despite the political changes that have altered the formal structure of European monarchy, his accounts of elegant gatherings in Vienna and Munich provide reassurance that civilization persists in centers that have resisted the democratic leveling that threatens to reduce all cultural expression to the lowest common denominator of popular appeal. The Count's travel stories serve as subtle criticism of French society's willingness to embrace innovations that more conservative European elites view with appropriate skepticism. The social dynamics of the evening reveal the complex relationships between different forms of cultural authority in late 19th century French society. Its aristocratic tradition, professional expertise, financial power combined to create a coalition united in opposition to democratic innovation. The guests represent different sources of cultural influence and heritage, social position, educational credentials, and economic resources, but share common interests in maintaining systems of cultural evaluation that preserve their authority. To determine what constitutes appropriate artistic expression in urban development, the restaurant's atmosphere enhances the sense of cultural solidarity among the diners, as the carefully designed interior creates an environment that celebrates traditional luxury and artistic refinement while providing subtle contrast to the industrial aesthetics that dominate the exposition grounds. The soft lighting, elegant furnishings, sophisticated service create a social space that embodies the cultural values that the guests believe should guide French society rather than the democratic and technological priorities that have produced structures like Eiffel's Tower. The evening's entertainment includes subtle performances that reinforce the cultural themes underlying the dinner conversation, as musicians present classical repertoire that celebrates established artistic traditions, rather than the experimental compositions that some modern composers have begun to create in response to urban and industrial themes. The music provides both pleasant accompaniment to conversation and implicit commentary on the superiority of traditional artistic forms that have proven their worth through centuries of appreciation by educated audiences. As the evening deepens and the tower's iron latwork becomes a dark silhouette against the star-filled sky, the conversation at Maxim's gradually shifts from aesthetic criticism to broader concerns about France's position in an increasingly competitive international environment where industrial capability determines national strength and cultural influence. The guests understand, despite their preference for traditional values, that their country's future depends on successfully navigating the tension between maintaining cultural distinction and achieving technological advancement necessary for economic prosperity and military security in a world where British industrial supremacy and German efficiency threaten. French prestige, that the champagne that flows freely throughout the evening carries its own symbolism as a product that represents both French excellence and the kind of traditional craftsmanship that the guests believe should serve as a model for national development. Dom Perignon et Bas Passif, carefully selected for this gathering, embodies centuries of accumulated expertise in creating luxury goods that achieve international recognition through patient refinement rather than revolutionary innovation. Each bottle represents the kind of cultural export that enhances French influence through quality and sophistication rather than mere quantity or efficiency, suggesting that national greatness might be achieved through cultivation of distinctive excellence rather than imitation of foreign industrial methods. Count de Montclair raises his glass in a toast that captures the evening's underlying themes while avoiding explicit political commentary that might disturb the sophisticated atmosphere that Maxims cultivates for its distinguished clientele. To the eternal glory of France, he declares, his words carrying implications that extend far beyond simple patriotism to encompass the complex relationship between cultural tradition and national power that shapes elite thinking about their country's future. The toast acknowledges both pride in French achievement and anxiety about threats to French distinctiveness in an era when industrial standardization threatens to reduce national cultures. 2. Variations on common technological themes. Madame Dubois responds with observations about the international visitors who have flocked to Paris for the exposition, noting with satisfaction that sophisticated travelers continue to seek out traditional French cultural experiences rather than merely examining industrial displays and technological innovations. Her recent conversations with American and British visitors reveal that foreign appreciation for French civilization focuses on artistic achievement, culinary excellence, and social refinement rather than engineering accomplishments or manufacturing capability. This preference suggests that France's true competitive advantage lies in cultural rather than industrial supremacy, providing hope that the nation can maintain international influence through cultivation of distinctive aesthetic and social traditions. Architect Delacroix contributes professional insights about international architectural trends that reveal growing appreciation for French classical traditions among foreign architects who have grown weary of purely functional approaches to building design. His correspondence with colleagues in London, Berlin, and New York indicates increasing interest in French architectural principles that balance practical requirements with aesthetic considerations, suggesting that cultural influence can serve as an effective form of soft power that enhances national prestige without requiring direct economic or military competition. The international demand for French architectural expertise demonstrates that traditional cultural excellence can generate tangible economic benefits while advancing national interests through non-political means. The dinner's progression through courses that showcase traditional French culinary techniques provides opportunities for more detailed discussion of how cultural excellence might serve national purposes in an era of increasing international competition. The preparation and presentation of each dish demonstrates the kind of attention to detail and sophisticated technique that distinguishes French civilization from more purely utilitarian approaches to human needs, creating experiences that justify premium pricing while generating international recognition for French cultural superiority. The guests discuss how similar principles might be applied to other aspects of national development, creating competitive advantages based on quality and sophistication rather than simple efficiency or cost reduction. The wine pairings selected for each course illustrate the complex relationships between tradition and innovation that characterize successful adaptation to changing circumstances while maintaining cultural distinctiveness. The sommelier presents vintages that demonstrate how traditional French winemaking techniques can be enhanced through selective adoption of modern methods that improve quality without compromising the essential character that makes French wines distinctive. This approach suggests that cultural preservation need not require rejection of all innovation, but rather careful discrimination between changes that enhance traditional excellence and those that threaten to reduce distinctive products to standardize commodities. The social composition of the evening's gathering reflects a complex alliance between different forms of elite authority that must cooperate to maintain French cultural leadership in an era of democratic politics and international competition. Aristocratic tradition provides historical legitimacy and cultural authority. Professional expertise offers technical knowledge and institutional credibility, while financial resources enable patronage and investment necessary for cultural institutions and artistic production. The successful coordination of these different forms of power demonstrates the potential for elite leadership to guide national development while adapting to political changes that have altered but not eliminated the influence of educated and wealthy minorities. The conversation returns repeatedly to concerns about the cultural impact of democratic politics on French national development. As the guests express worry that popular participation in cultural decisions might lead to adoption of foreign models rather than cultivation of distinctive French traditions, they note with alarm the popular enthusiasm for American technological innovations in German organizational methods, warning that uncritical adoption of foreign approaches threatens to undermine the cultural distinctiveness that provides France's primary competitive advantage in international competition. The tower serves as a symbol of this broader problem. Structure that achieves popular success by imitating foreign engineering approaches rather than developing uniquely French solutions. 2. Technological challenges. The guests share information about recent cultural developments in other European capitals, comparing French institutional support for traditional arts with foreign approaches that seem to prioritize innovation over excellence. Their reports from Vienna, London, and St. Petersburg revealed varying strategies for maintaining cultural leadership while adapting to modern conditions, providing models for French consideration while highlighting the dangers of abandoning traditional approaches too quickly. The international perspective reinforces their conviction that France possesses distinctive cultural advantages that should be preserved and enhanced rather than sacrificed. 2. Democratic pressures for technological modernization. Economic discussions focus on the relationship between cultural excellence and commercial success, as the guests explore how traditional French industries might maintain profitability while preserving the quality standards that distinguish their products from foreign competitors. The luxury goods market provides examples of successful strategies that combine traditional craftsmanship with selective innovation, creating products that command premium prices through demonstrated superiority rather than simple cost advantages. These business models suggest that cultural preservation can serve economic purposes while maintaining the aesthetic standards that define French civilization. The evening's intellectual atmosphere encourages philosophical reflection on the proper relationship between individual excellence and democratic equality in societies that must balance traditional cultural values with modern political requirements. The guests discuss how educated minorities might exercise cultural leadership without appearing to oppose democratic principles, exploring strategies for influence that work through persuasion and example rather than direct political control. Their conversation reveals sophisticated understanding of the challenges facing traditional elites in democratic societies while demonstrating continued commitment to cultural standards that transcend popular opinion. International political developments provide context for concerns about France's ability to maintain cultural influence while competing with nations that have achieved greater industrial and military power through different approaches. to modernization. The guests discuss recent diplomatic developments that reveal the growing importance of economic and technological capability in determining national influence, while expressing hope that cultural excellence might provide alternative sources of international prestige that supplement rather than replace traditional forms of power. Their analysis reveals both realistic assessment of contemporary challenges and determined commitment to maintaining French distinctiveness despite changing international circumstances. The gradual emptying of the restaurant as the evening progresses creates an increasingly intimate atmosphere that encourages more personal reflections on the individual costs of social and cultural change. The guests share concerns about their own positions in a society that seems to value technical competence over cultural refinement, while expressing determination to maintain standards of excellence regardless of popular indifference or hostility. Their conversation reveals the psychological pressures facing traditional elites in rapidly changing societies, while demonstrating the personal commitment necessary to preserve cultural traditions against democratic leveling tendencies.